From that day on, my grandson would come to me when I was doing the dishes and do what he wanted to do and then leave. I just had to stand there, frozen in place. Even when I was mopping the floor in the living room, my grandson would come to me. Please like and subscribe. Hello? I am a woman who has passed 60. It's been over 10 years since I sent off my husband and have been living alone. I wanted to talk about what happened with my grandson to someone, and I ended up sharing it here. I got married in my early 20s. I got married to a man who was 13 years older than me and was a widower. My husband was raising a daughter as a divorced man. My mother-in-law took care of the daughter, and my husband was working. My husband was the youngest son of my mother-in-law. At that time, my mother-in-law was well over 70. My husband was in the middle of growing his business. When I asked him why he was working day and night, he said he wanted to travel with his mother and daughter. He said he wanted to travel a lot with his mother, who had only suffered in her life. I loved the sight of my husband, who was working hard and was very filial, so I rashly moved into my husband's house at that young age and started living there. There were no troubles with my mother-in-law, but we managed to live well. My mother-in-law passed away before turning 80, and I continued to raise my husband's daughter as my own with love. I gave birth to 2 sons. My daughter was always good to me. When my daughter reached puberty, our relationship became a bit awkward. I thought she was distancing herself from me because I was her stepmother, but I later found out that it wasn't just because of puberty that she was avoiding me. According to my daughter, the way men in the neighborhood looked at me was strange. She heard some men in the neighborhood making vulgar remarks about me that were not fit to be spoken aloud. I've been told that I was as pretty as a picture since I was young. When my daughter was in middle school, I was in my early 30s, which was a very young age. Everyone in the neighborhood knew I was married, but there must have been a few men in the neighborhood who said strange things about me behind my back. There was a time when my daughter brought her boyfriend home when she was in high school. I tried to be nice to my daughter's boyfriend and made him delicious food. A few days later, my daughter got angry with me over a trivial matter. I didn't know why she was doing that, and it was just frustrating. Later, I found out that my daughter's boyfriend kept saying he wanted to come over to our house. My daughter's boyfriend told my daughter that her mother was very pretty and had a very nice voice, so my daughter must have been jealous of me. After that incident, my daughter didn't bring not only her boyfriend, but also her same-sex friends home. My daughter graduated from college, got a job, had a good time, and was an ordinary office worker who worked hard. One day, she brought a man she was going to marry. He was tall and handsome. My husband and I happily accepted their marriage as we had no reason to object. After a few years of marriage, my daughter and her husband moved to the countryside. My daughter quit her job and went to live with her in-laws because they were not in good health. At first, my husband and I were very worried. However, it turned out that there was no need to worry. My daughter's in-laws were well-known landowners in that area. My husband even said that it would be better to manage the property in the countryside than to work hard. During that time, about 10 years ago, my husband had an affair with a young woman. He told me he would give me half of his property and wanted a divorce. I granted him a divorce without any regrets, as he was always busy with business. and saw me as a nanny to raise our children and a housekeeper to do housework. Our children were quite upset about our divorce. Especially my daughter was furious at her father. She knew that I married her father at a young age because I felt sorry for her. She said she would never see her father again. Time passed and my grandson entered college. My daughter asked me to take care of him. As he was going to a college near where I lived, I had taken care of my grandson before. When my daughter was not feeling well, I went to her house, did housework, and took care of my grandson for a few months. At that time, my grandson said to me a few times that he wished I was his mother. Oliver, my grandson, attended college while living in our house. He came home late in his freshman year because he was busy playing. After playing for a while, he lost interest and started coming home early in his sophomore year. Although Oliver was tall and big, he always looked like a baby to me. He sweet-talked me, saying he wished I was his mother. He is not my blood, but he is such a cute kid. When I see his back, his broad back looks so reliable that I can't help but pat it. One day, when Oliver was in his sophomore year, I saw a strange scene at home. It was Oliver next to the laundry basket. When he saw me, Oliver was surprised and dropped what he was holding. I told Oliver to sit down for a moment. I felt proud thinking that Oliver had grown up a lot. Oliver said he always found me very beautiful, as I always treated him with a smiling face. I laughed inside when I heard him say that he had imagined me as his woman so far. Me, at this old age? I made it clear to Oliver that while his mother is not my biological child, she is the daughter I raised, and he is as good as my grandson. Oliver nodded as if he knew everything. I asked Oliver if he had a girlfriend. Oliver said he had friends who were girls, but no one he was deeply involved with. When I asked if he had dated a girl he liked, he replied that it hadn't worked out as he had hoped. When I asked if he had ever had a girlfriend, he said he had briefly, but it didn't last long. When I asked if he had any experience with women, he said he hadn't. I asked if young people these days weren't a bit more liberal about such things, but Oliver didn't answer. I hugged Oliver, calling him a cute guy. Oliver, who had grown so big that he wouldn't fit in my arms. Oliver asked me why I didn't scold him. I told him I thought it was just a sign that he was growing healthy. Oliver said if I were his mother, I would have scolded him a lot. I asked Oliver how hard it must be for a young grandson like him. When I asked if it was hard, Oliver couldn't answer for a while. Then he nodded. It turned out he had a lot of curiosity, but he wasn't good at dating. I chuckled inside. I forced myself not to laugh, and I told Oliver that even though it was hard, a good girlfriend would come along and everything would naturally work out. Oliver looked at me with a look of despair. I can't tell you how desperate that look was. It was the same look my husband gave me a long time ago. To shake off the strange feeling, I just kept repeating to Oliver that it was hard. But what could we do? Oliver had tears welling up in his eyes. I suggested that we find a solution together, since it was not a problem that I could solve on my own. But Oliver just looked at me blankly. Oliver, looking at me with his eyes as big as a cow's, was so cute. I couldn't help but ask him jokingly, "Even so, did you see me, an old woman, as a woman?" To my surprise, Oliver gave an unexpected answer. As he had said earlier, I was the woman of his dreams. When I asked why, he said his mother was always strict. but I was always kind to him. And he said my beauty always shone regardless of my age, although it was from my grandson. I felt good to hear that I was beautiful after a long time. It seems that a woman is a woman, even when she is old. I may have made an excuse that Oliver was too pitiful, but I was also very lonely. It had been 10 years since I broke up with my husband and lived alone. I suggested to Oliver that we make a promise. After making a promise that it would be just for today, I took a shower. Then I sat at the dressing table and touched up my makeup. I sprayed perfume and called Oliver. Oliver, who came into the room, sat next to me. I took Oliver's hand and whispered in his ear, "You can do whatever you want now." I let Oliver do everything he wanted to do. I was terribly nervous, but that trembling was also a thrill. It was a strange experience for me, who had never spent the night with anyone other than my husband. From what I heard from my friends, they said they stayed up all night on their honeymoon, and so did Oliver and I. The next day, I treated Oliver as if nothing had happened. Oliver seemed a bit awkward with me, but he seemed to be trying to act calm. A few days passed and I found myself thinking about that night. The memory of feeling like I was reaching the ceiling several times kept coming back to me. Oliver seemed to be struggling, but he showed no reaction. I thought things were going well, but deep down I felt neglected. Oliver seemed to be restraining himself, probably because of our promise of just for today. As the days went by, I felt more and more empty and neglected. When I went to the bathroom, I deliberately left the door open. Oliver saw me as he passed by the bathroom and closed the door for me. I kept leaving the bathroom door open, and when I showered, I left the bathroom door half open. Oliver glanced at me as he passed by. One day, while I was showering, I heard Oliver coming in. I pretended not to know. After I finished showering, I just walked out. I locked eyes with Oliver, who was in the living room. I deliberately looked surprised, but Oliver looked down to the floor. I stood there waiting until Oliver lifted his face to look at me. The moment I locked eyes with Oliver, I smiled and nodded and went into the room. Oliver followed me in. That night, I stayed up all night without a wink of sleep. Oliver apologized to me. I reassured him that it was okay and stroked his back. Oliver promised to be careful so that such a thing wouldn't happen again. So I told him that I would feel upset then. Oliver looked at me and laughed. I also looked at Oliver and laughed brightly. After that day, occasionally when I was doing the dishes, Oliver would come over, do what he wanted, and then leave. I had no choice but to stand still. Even when I was mopping the living room floor, Oliver came to me. Oliver and I didn't need words. What Oliver wanted was what I wanted. Once, Oliver and I went for a walk. The weather was nice, so we walked far, and on the way back, we entered a quiet alley where there weren't many people. In that alley, Oliver and I also had our moments. I was incredibly happy. I had thoughts of this can't be right, but I just focused on the happiness I felt. One day, Oliver told me something. He said he wouldn't get married. If he wanted to maintain a good relationship with his grandmother for a lifetime, he should date girls and get married like others. Oliver asked several times if it had to be that way, and I said yes. Oliver said he understood, but he repeatedly said that the grandmother must keep her promise. I joyfully agreed. I am so happy. I have thoughts that this shouldn't happen, but I am trying to focus on the feeling of happiness. It's a very embarrassing story, and a story I can't tell anyone. So I'm using the power of anonymity to spill it out here.